Episode number 58 of Making the Case. Does marriage need an upgrade? Stay tuned and find out. Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of Making the Case, episode 58. Does marriage need an upgrade? Of course, I'm no other than your host, the one, the only, Mr. Spectacular, Dr. Jacob Isom, educator, author, speaker, entrepreneur, father, content creator, a little bit of everything. Back at you again, man. Appreciate y'all for checking out another episode. Got another great episode for you guys again today. Does marriage need an upgrade? I can't wait to get into the pieces of evidence for this. But before we get into our opening statement, of course, we got to go over our two channel norms. One, we attack points and not people. And two, we don't do all the cussing and derogatory stuff because we're professional over here. Now, so let's go ahead and get into the open statement. But before I do, I definitely want to send a shout out to those who are impacted by the California wildfires. Hope you're safe. And make sure safety is the number one priority. Material possessions and physical things can always be replaced. So definitely want to get that out the way. We're here on a very cold winter evening. But let's get into our opening statement. So, does marriage need an upgrade? My simple answer is yes, it sure does. Of course, we attach marriage to the Bible and God, even though in my first book, I talk about the history of marriage, how, of course, there was a such thing as marriage before we even had the Bible and before we even had religious understandings. But that can be a topic for a whole nother video if you would like that. Let me know in the comment section or my social media if you want me to do that video, and I definitely will. Or you could just go pick up my first book, The Living Testament, Trading Dollars for Change. I'll talk about that in there. Shameless plug. Anywho, but yes, we most definitely marriage need to upgrade. First of all, marriage need to upgrade when it comes to the laws as it relates to marriage. We're gonna get into that in this video. Also, I believe that marriage is outdated when we think of it in terms of "to death do you part," right? In our modern times, most things does not last forever. All right. When we look at the numbers, which we're gonna look at some numbers today, most people are not lasting 40, 50, 60 years. I believe that we should give people a chance to get out of situations that may not be fitting them with the least amount of damage financially, emotionally, and things of that nature. So I'm advocating, and I'm not sure if you heard this before, but I'm advocating for us to have pretty much clauses in a marriage contract that will allow us to get out after 5 years, after 10 years. And we kind of renegotiate it because marriage is a contract, right? So if marriage is a contract, well, we should have a clause in it to say that we can get out of it. Okay. So I don't see why that would be a bad thing to do. I just think in 2025, it's necessary because it really can't harm you, because if you love somebody, you rocking with them, all you gotta do is re-up your contract, right? With now, of course, the government will want it to be a nominal fee, right? Or some kind of fee, which that could help, you know, with the economy and things of that nature. I think people wouldn't mind doing it because it actually will end up benefiting them in the long run. So that is my proposal. That's how I feel like one necessary shift and upgrade that marriage need. And once again, we need to look at the marriage laws, or well, really the divorce laws, because we know that almost half of Americans are getting divorced. So we need to look what happens um, after you decide to end your marriage. But it is a couple other factors we need to look at, which we're going to look at some of those factors in this video today. Um, Definitely make sure you stay tuned, because you're not going to miss what I have to show you. And really, without further ado, let's get into our first piece of evidence. All right, so for my first piece of evidence, I will be going over some stats for you. You know, I love my stats, okay? My data, facts, and statistics. Love it, all right? Because I'm an information-based channel, edutainment, so that's what we do, all right? Just so that you have a clear understanding of what's going on. I want to look at some stats you may not have heard or seen before. Um, and I pulled this from our law firm's website, law firm Wilkinson and Fink Minor. Hoping I pronounced that right. So they compiled some stats, some marriage and divorce stats, that I want to go over, just to put into perspective of why I think marriage does need an upgrade. All right. So let's look at that, or look at these stats. I'm not gonna read all of them to you, but some I just want to bring to your attention. All right. So number 5 says the divorce rate per 1,000 married women is nearly double that of 1960, but down from all-time high of 22.6 in the early 1980s. Um, Number 6, almost 50% of all marriages in the United States will end in divorce or separation. I think we know that stat, right? So if 4 of your friends are married, 2 of them will definitely get a divorce. That's what the facts say, the numbers say. So we know that 41% of first marriages end, and then it gets higher at 60% for second. Then it get higher for third, 73, which I imagine most people are not getting married 3 times. Probably a very small percentage of people. And then let's see. I don't want to go over the countries, but we are the 6th highest country when it comes to divorce. I do want to throw that out. Let's see. There are nearly 3 divorces in the time it takes for a couple to recite their wedding vows. 2 minutes. That's pretty interesting, right? More than 172 divorces occur during your typical romantic movie, 2 hours. 430 divorces happen during the average wedding reception, 5 hours. These are some crazy numbers. Like, the fact that they find it is amazing to me. Let's see. We do know the average first marriage and ends in divorce lasts about 8 years, right? Which is why I'm proposing uh, uh, amendment to the marriage contract, right? So even with that number, so make it so that at 10 years, right? You got a clause for 10 years. After 10 years, you can say, you know what? We tried for a whole decade, it didn't work. So now we can move on without, and both people understand that that is in the marriage contract. To me, I think it will work. Some people might disagree, but I think it will work. Let's see. The average age for couples going through their first divorce is 30 years. Let's see. Professionals with the highest divorce rates: dancers, you think, bartenders, massage therapists, gaming cage workers. I have no idea what that is. Gaming service workers. Now I do know what that is. Professional with the lowest divorce rate: farmers. I imagine so. Podiatrists, clergy, optometrists. It seems like very uh strange, but farmers make sense to me. Agriculture engineers. Wow. Let's see. I want to get to the good ones though. Um, let's see. Let's get to the well, that's military divorce rate. I don't really want to touch that. Um, Same sex divorce stats. That's interesting. About 1% of married same sex couples get divorced each year, while about 2% of married straight couples divorce. Lesbian couples are nearly twice as likely to end their marriage or civil union than gay male couples are. Hmm. January is considered divorce month, and we just happen to be in January. People start looking for information before the new year starts, but they can't do much until attorneys are back in office. January 12th through 16th seems to be the magic week for filing. Now, that is crazy. I've never thought about that before. Like, there are certain months where high, and like people literally get a new year's resolution to get a divorce. That is crazy. Um, we already in the previous video looked at why people are getting divorced, so we won't look at that. Uh, 48% of those who married before the age of 18 are likely to divorce within 10 years, compared to 25% of those who married after the age of 25. Of course, age definitely plays a factor. Let's see. If a person has strong religious belief, the risk of divorce is 14% less, and having no religious affiliation make you 14% more likely to get divorced. Um, High school dropouts are 13% more likely to get divorced. Individuals who attend college have a 13% lower risk of divorce. Let's see. It's something that I want to. Women with 6 or more premarital sexual partner are almost 3 times less likely to be in a stable marriage. And so when we have the conversation of talking about, women with high body counts and why body count matter and why past matter, this is why, right? We literally have the stats and numbers to back it up. So ladies, yes, for men, your past is important. All right. Um, Pornography addiction was cited as a factor in 56% of divorces, according to a recent study. That's interesting. And I always wonder if people consider pornography watching cheating. And I think it really depends on who you ask. But I mean, I can see why you would consider that. So, um, man, I really want to. Okay, this might be what I want to get to. An annual income of over 50,000 can decrease the risk of divorce by as much as 30% versus those with an income under 25,000. Feeling that one spouse spent money foolishly increase the likelihood of divorce 45% for both men and women. Money is a big factor. No, those wasn't the ones. I think here we are. 43% of children in the United States are being raised without their father. 43%, that is huge. And we can see the ramifications in society because of it. That is huge. When the parents are happily married, the risk of divorce of their children decreased about 14%. 90% of divorced mothers have custody of their children. Um, here we go. This is what we really want to get to. The average total cost of divorce in the United States is $15,000. Now, do you see why I say we should upgrade marriage? Because that's a lot of money that people don't have. Families with children that were not poor before the divorce see their income drop as much as 50%. So not only do we need some amendments to the marriage contract, we really need to be educating people on what to expect in the marriage. If a divorce happened, these are the things that more likely to happen. Like education is huge. Uh, Almost 50% of the parents with children that are going through a divorce move into poverty after the divorce. Crazy. 60% of people under poverty guidelines divorce women and children. A new study entitled Divorces and Death shows that broken marriage can kill at the same rate as smoking cigarettes. These are the impacts of divorce, people. One research determined that a single divorce costs state and federal governments about $30,000 based on such thing as the higher use of food stamp and public housing. The nation's 1.4 million divorces in 2002 are estimated to have cost taxpayers more than $30 billion. This is what divorce and breaking up families is doing to us, people. All right. So those are the stats. And I'm sure that you probably haven't seen a lot of those stats before. Some of them I've never seen before, but this is why we need to upgrade when it comes to marriage. We need to change how we look at marriage, right? No longer are we in the days, the olden times, the biblical days. We're not in those times anymore. We got to look at marriage a lot differently. We must get serious about relationship building, about educating people on the importance of, because right now I think marriage is just cultural, right? It's just a thing that you do. It's no different than buying a house, right? Getting a job. It's just what you do. Two people get together and eventually get married. But what is the seriousness that we going into it with? Because really, not only should we have amendments to the marriage contract, we should have penalties, right? If you break this agreement in the contract, you have to suffer this penalty. So we need consequences and we need ways out of it. Just saying. All right. So let's get into our second piece of evidence. All right. So for my second piece of evidence, we're going to go to, what does the Bible say about divorce? All right. And marriage. So since we know that most of our country is Christians, let's see if people are following the Bible when it comes to marriage and why they should be getting a divorce. All right. So I have found an article from a platform called Mill Creek Christian Counseling. It's titled Divorce in the Bible, 7 Scripture Verses for Dealing with Divorce. So before I even read this, I'm pretty sure that most people do not follow biblical principles when it comes to getting a divorce, right? Because we say until death do us part, but we know that that's not even true, because even the Bible said there's reasons why you can get a divorce. So that's a contradiction. And so that is a reason why we need to change the marriage contract to adapt it into 2025 living standards, because we are not the same people. All right. We don't think the same. We don't eat the same. We don't behave the same. We have evolved and adapted in a totally different climate. All right. So let's look at these scripture verses and see what they say about getting divorced and marriage and all that good stuff. All right. The subject of divorce between a man and woman is possibly brought up more today than ever before due to the stresses placed on modern couples by a fast-paced world. Sadly, the divorce rate for Christian couples is on par with unbelievers. This is devastating as God places extremely high importance on marriage. Consider the following verses about divorce in the Bible. When you marry, you become one flesh. Therefore, treating your spouse badly is like beating up on yourself. Although it's not, right? Pain and suffering are the obvious results for both partners. Divorce in the Bible is only permissible if either party engages in an adulterous relationship outside of marriage. Let me read that again. Divorce in the Bible is only permissible if either partner engages in an adulterous relationship outside of marriage, even though that is not completely true. Because the Bible also talks about the 4 A's, right? So there's addiction, there's abuse, there's adultery, and what is the fourth A? Addiction, abuse, adultery. It'll come to me. So that's not completely true, right? Which the Bible does have issues with contradictions and things of that nature, particularly when we look at the Old Testament and New Testament. So we know the Old Testament is a little more strict than the New Testament, right? So let's look at these verses. So in Matthew chapter 5, verse 32, but I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery. Anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Okay. So this verse is saying that you only get divorced in case of someone is cheating, which a lot of people have said that it's only cheating when you're in a marriage. Now, people in relationships, I know we're not going to agree with that, but I tend to agree with that, right? Because we understand the seriousness of a marriage, right? Not saying that if you in a relationship that you don't owe each other monogamy and commitment, not saying that, but technically in the eyes of the Lord, right? You're not committing adultery because you had to be married in order to commit adultery. So God created marriage as the perfect union between man and woman so they could raise a family, even though God did not create marriage. We know marriage is a social construction, just putting that out there. This is a covenant for life and should not be entered in lightly with divorce as an option. Divorce in the Bible is only considered under the only exceptional circumstance of sexual immorality, even though, once again, we know this is not true. Another verse, Matthew chapter 5, verse 27. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery, but I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So that means that probably every man has cheated based on this Bible verse, which I would say that most Christians probably would not agree with that. That I could be wrong, but you know. In the 10 Commandments, the 6th commandment outlines that we must not commit adultery. The above verse follows Jesus, showing not only is the standard difficult to attain, but God's holiness requires complete self-control over one's thought life, which some control over your thoughts is definitely possible, but some are not. Let's just be real. All right. This is impossible and points to our need for Jesus, the only man who could be sent. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's go to the next one. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 33, however, each one of you also must love his wife as he loved himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Sounds pretty straightforward and simple, right? I don't think anyone will disagree with that, right? Let's move to the next one. This is Peter chapter 3, verse 1. Wives, in the same way, submit yourself to your own husband, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives. So they're saying that a wife submitting to her husband will get him to gain favor with the Lord. So let's see the explanation they have to say. In writing this letter to the Christians on the persecution, Peter indicates how we should respond to human authorities in our lives, the unjust and harsh. Do not rebel, but submit for God's sake. This shows the confidence we feel in his power, control, and love, and how we can show others our true faith even as we suffer. Peter then suggests that this includes wives. Even if the husband is not a believer, her respect and conduct toward her husband may finally convince him that Christ brought about that change. When it comes to divorce in the Bible, submission should not be seen as abject obedience. You must obey God ahead of all human authority. Refuse to obey instructions that oppose God's revealed will for us. Hmm. All right. Uh, let's see. Malachi verse chapter 2, verse 16. The man who hates and divorces his wife, says the Lord, the God of Israel, does violence to the one he should protect, says the Lord Almighty. So it said the Old Testament talks about covering someone with your garment, which is a metaphor for protection. Husbands must protect and provide for their wives. Malachi claimed this was no longer happening in Israel. Men were divorcing their Jewish wives to marry pagan women. God in no sense approved of divorce in the Bible. Okay, it's not approved in the Bible, although there's cases in the Bible where divorce is okay. He acquaints the act with the attitude of hatred. The old rules for divorce were never meant to imply the Lord's approval. Such laws were meant to lessen the impact of such sin. This was to protect the rights of women who in the culture will mostly depend on their husband and children for support. Now that makes sense. That does make sense. All right. All right. So those are the different verses dealing with divorce and marriage. Um, and I would I agree to a certain extent with a lot of what they were saying. Um, there are reasons for people to get divorced, right? I mean, I think it would be foolish to say they're not. But I think a lot of us will agree that a lot of people are getting divorced for very silly reasons. They're really not sticking it out and working on things. And you know, abandonment. That was the last A. Abandonment, abuse, adultery, and addiction. Those are the four A's that the Bible talk about that you can get a divorce for. So, and I even agree with those, right? But I also think there should be more of a vetting process to get to understand a person, right? You really have to understand how a person operates. Now, do people change, particularly as you grow old with them? Yes. But when you establish that foundation and you really, that's why it's important for wives to submit to their husbands, right? That's why it's important for people to be in a family atmosphere where you have kids and, that bond and that love, that unconditional love is there. It will be a lot harder to break that, in my opinion. So I just want to show you that to show you the reasons why we really need to update uh, marriage, marriage laws, marriage contract, and things of that nature. Because some of what it says in the Bible is relevant, but some of it is not in today's age. Um, I mean, I think a lot of us realize that, and like this article said that just as many Christians are getting divorced as unbelievers. I don't even know why that they brought that up, but because whether you a believer or non-believer, we all living in the same world, right? So anywho, let's get to our third piece of evidence and wrap this thing on up. All right, so my last and final piece of evidence of why I say marriage needs to be upgraded or updated, however you want to look at it, is we're going to look at does the divorce court favor women or hurt men, right? Because we really have been hearing that a lot recently when we look at the numbers. So we're going to look at a little bit of the numbers here in this evidence to see why we just may need to update and upgrade marriage, particularly when it comes to divorce, right? Because that's really the biggest thing, right? Because people enjoy getting into the marriage, going on honeymoon, having a wedding and reception. People enjoy that. It's just a divorce when people are leaving, because we know almost half of people who get married are getting divorced. That, well, if those numbers are there, which they are, right, we need to make contingencies to, well, when things fail, we don't need to be. I showed you the numbers of how it impacts our society, right? Like, so we don't need to be like hurting people financially because really the kids fail and are hurt the most by it. So let's look. I have a article from another law firm, Robert Miller and Associates, and the title is "Why Do Divorce Courts Favor Women, or Is That Just a Myth?" So let's look at it. Let's get into it. Divorce is an emotionally taxing process for everyone who is involved in it. The situation gets even more complex if the dissolution of marriage must be settled in court. Divorce courts are often perceived to favor women over men, especially in the questions of child custody or finances. However, why do divorce courts favor women, or is this just a common misconception? When it comes to divorce law, there is no one size fits all approach that applies to every situation, since in the U.S., laws vary from state to state, which is so true. Okay. When the divorce case is brought to the court, the judge considers many factors when making decisions on essential aspects of alimony, child custody and support, division of assets and property, and so on. The outcome of the proceeding largely depends on the laws adopted in the specific state that had jurisdiction over the case. And the number one thing is don't go to court, right? Settle things outside of court, because once a judge get involved, you have no power, you have no control. Or stay together. All right. Um, in this regard, divorce laws that regulate these issues may differ based on gender, but this does not necessarily mean that courts favor one gender over another. Rather, judges make decisions taking into account the best interests of both parties, especially their children. However, as in many other situations, there are some exceptions that allow one to think that gender biases is easy. Divorce online proceedings do exist, which, yes, gender biases definitely play a factor. Um, no, I want to get into the impact of gender bias in divorce codes. The impact of gender bias on judicial decisions and unfair divorce laws are contentious issues in U.S. divorce courts, have long been accused of favoring women over males in specific instances, and this has led to some controversial decisions that could have been avoided with a more balanced and gender neutral approach. For example, it has been estimated that women get custody over children in 90% of uncontested cases, which is crazy, right? How do you justify those numbers? Additionally, 40% of men lost custody battles due to gender biases within the court system. Moreover, men are more likely to pay higher alimony or child support payments than women, even if the former are financially able to do so. Once again, how do you explain that? Finally, judges may be more lenient towards women when determining the divorce grounds. Gender bias in divorce courts create an atmosphere of unfair judgment, which can lead to feelings of frustration and resentment between the spouses that can complicate the proceeding and affect the divorce outcome. Ultimately, gender bias in divorce court undermines the fairness and justice expected from any governmental system. Now, we know this has been happening for a very long time, right? We know who's always been more likely to get the kids, pay child support, alimony, things of that nature, to get houses, cars. Like, this has been going on for a while, but no one is outraged on a large scale. Why? Because it's impact men and not women, right? Let's just be real. So this is the reason why. And the thing about it, it could be the fact that the laws are there to play, to have an even playing field, but people are human, right? So people have more favor and more tendency to lean one direction than the other because they feel bad for women. So, but if we had certain laws that were put into place to make sure, because 90% custody, I mean, that's crazy. Come on. So we just got to do a deeper dive into stuff like this. Uh, Divorce courts are often inclined to favor women when it comes to custody due to the fact that the biggest share of primary caregivers are mothers, even if both parents are involved in the kid lives. But we know why that's the case, though, because men are working. Even when they were together, men were working more so, working more hours. In addition to this, the courts often take into account the fact that from a psychological point of view, mothers tend to be more emotionally attached to their children than fathers. I don't get why emotions should play a factor, to be honest with you. There are actually more reasons why divorce always favor the woman, not only in custody decision, but also in the child support award. Females are often seen as the one who take care for the children the most, covering all their needs, and consequently, they require a considerable share of financial aid. Besides, many females choose or are pressured to be stay-at-home moms over pursuing a career. I don't think that's the case nowadays, for sure. Because with so many single parent households, they have to work. They can't be stay at home moms, which often makes their income insufficient to support their children after divorce. This is also a reason why courts allow spousal support to mothers along with child support. But see, this is not the case. So now what is the argument? When the woman is working and she got her own career, stuff like that, now you can't use that argument. So when it comes, why do divorce courts favor women over men and are more lenient to them in terms of finances? The common reason to reduce earning potential of women due to childbirth and child care. Well, it's really childbirth, right? Because when women get pregnant, but that's why you have to vet. We got to do a better job of vetting. We can't be rushing and get into a relationship and rushing to get into marriage. While it may seem like an unfair game for some, it does reflect the reality that many U.S. families live in today, where one parent, in particular, a mother, takes on much more responsibility for children than a father. And that's because the man is the protecting provider. So the man is always going to be responsible for getting out there and making money. So it's almost like it's just a natural thing to do. You feel like women need money because you want them to have custody of the kids. That frees up the man to work to give the money. So it's almost like it's a system that's established and set up kind of naturally and socially. Oh, let's see. Notably, this type of state law, community property, or equitable distribution one will largely affect the court's final decision. Some states, such as Pennsylvania and New York, require equitable division of assets upon divorce, making sure it is shared fairly between both spouses. Meanwhile, California and Texas are so-called 50-50 states, dividing the property even. Alimony, if alimony is generally granted by the court to a spouse who has less financial abilities and cannot maintain a decent level of life without being supported by a higher earning spouse. When deciding on alimony, a judge considers the length of marriage and inspects the financial status of each spouse, but not their gender. But I wonder how many women are paying alimony. I think Marriage Day Blige was, and maybe a couple other wealthy women, but it's definitely not the rule. It's the exception. Moreover, depending on the situation, the spouse who earn less is prompted to get their education and training necessary to improve their earning potential. Now that's funny. That is funny. I think that's all. Yeah, that's all I want to read. So clearly, we understand that when it comes to divorce, it favors women. I think we've known that for a very long time. We also understand that people are not living by the biblical principles when it comes to marriage, and it comes to the reasons why you should get a divorce. And we know all the stats and data behind marriage and divorce. So these suggest to me, in my assessment, of why we need to take a serious look of how we look at marriage and how we look at divorce. More so how we look at divorce, right? Because what's happening is when people are deciding to break up their families, whether it's a legit reason or not, the children are suffering, right? Now the woman got to take on more of a load financially. Then the man has to work harder to pay child support and alimony. So things are getting magnified because families are breaking apart. But one thing it definitely is helping, it's helping the economy though. Right? But we have to seriously look at the marriage contract, and we have to literally look at the divorce laws. They're not fair to men, and when it comes to marriage, it's really not conducive for a long-term situation if you have divorce put in place that's going to benefit one person over the other, right? So we've talked about it a lot. Divorce, women are incentivized to get a divorce. Why do you think there's so many women that are saying they're not happy? That's the only thing they need to say. But I didn't see anything on those Bible verses I was reading to say anything about not being happy is a reason why you should get a divorce. So let's change these laws, people. So all these things people want to be upset about, there's not enough conversation about, hey, let's really look at the marriage contract, these divorce laws. Let's update them. All right. That's going to be your episode 58 for today. Hopefully you learned a lot. I learned a lot just researching and finding this information. So definitely hit me up and reach out to me. Let me know any topics you want me to make the case on. Of course, my social media handles, my links to my websites. If you want to book a consultation, things of that nature. JacobIsom.com. RCDconsultancy.com is where you can find my books and you can find my contact form. All right. So as always, I'm you, you are me. Love always, love eternal. Remember, the worst thing you could do is lie to yourself, and I think we just made that case, baby. Deuces. One love.